This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome everyone to Season 6, Week 7 of KidLit International. I have with me today Holly from Canada, Chris from, you're still in London, Chris?
I am, yep.
Chris from London. Emma's from Brisbane and Karen from Sydney. Today we're talking about grants, and I guess it's a three-part question. How do we get them? How do we get government grants in particular? How do we source them, or where do we source them? And do I write the grant myself, or do I pay someone to write it for me? That's a question that's often asked. So I was a bit unfamiliar with all this myself. So looking up Australian sites this morning, there was a lot of organisations that came up that direct creatives to. The Australian Society of Authors, the Australian Publishers Association, the Small Press Network, Arts Queensland, Writing New South Wales, Creative Australia, the Copyright Agency. There were so many of them. And it's click on the link and follow the guidelines. When I looked through the guidelines, there is set specific criteria for each one of them. Depending on what kind of creative you are and what you are looking for. So it's a really huge area, not one that's easy. You would have to really want to do it and want to apply yourself to it, and I'm sure many are. But yeah, it's not something that I am, excuse me, really totally familiar with. So can anyone add to that?
You know, it was the same for myself. I actually haven't ever applied for any, and I wasn't super familiar with what was available. I remember thinking something I should look into, but again, I did have some insight into the fact that it can be quite a process to write them. Now, I could definitely see, like, this is what I would probably go ahead myself, and depending what I found, if I found something that was very aligned, perhaps it might be a little easier. But if not, I think regardless, I would definitely have someone else take a look at it and, you know, get some help. Like in Canada, the three different areas that were mentioned were like federal government, provincial government, and then private. And a lot of times charities. And I guess I did actually look into aligning my first book with a charity, but it happened to be during COVID as well. And it just seemed, I guess at that point, I was so determined to just get that book out, that first one, and I really didn't want to wait. So I did approach the Canadian area that would have covered a really aligned organization to my husband's cancer. And I didn't really, it was hard to hear back and kind of find out what the process was. And then I also looked into partnering up with an American, what would you say, American chapter, I guess. And I've often thought I should actually go back and visit that again, because it's a cause that I really believe in, and there probably is lots of things that I could do with them. Anyway, that is one thing that I considered waiting, but it just seemed like with all the things we remember all the red tape that there was during COVID, it just seemed like whenever you put one foot ahead, then there was going to be a couple of steps back. So I finally just decided, hey, I'm putting this out there, and maybe, but that's maybe when I do my audio. I haven't done the audio version yet. Maybe that would be a time when I could partner with them. So this has kind of given me an idea.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I think even out of COVID times, there's still red tape attached to the applications. Karen, have you had any experience with grants?
Haven't actually applied, but I do know someone who has received a grant, and I follow Creative Australia. I dip in there every now and then and I have a look what is available. It depending on you as a person, there are a lot of opportunities for Indigenous Australians. Like when I look on Creative Australia, there's always things that an Indigenous person can apply for. So they have a lot of opportunities. And I taught an Aboriginal girl who's super talented, and she applied for grants, and but she sings, but she writes her music and sings it. She's been to a chateau in France for a residency, and she's been to Tasmania for a residency, and she's had a grant for her first big song on Spotify. There's also grants available if you're disabled or deaf. They have more grants. So you need to go on and check and see what you're eligible to apply for. So when I've been on, there hasn't been anything I can apply for because I'm published. So that cuts you out. And then I'm not like next level. I'm in the middle. So that's another thing you need to find. So I've only ever looked at Creative Australia. I do know Emma, I think, mentioned a girl in Queensland, and she's very good at getting grants, but she gets them through her state government, I think, or local council. I think Queensland has more opportunities for that from when I've looked compared to where I live in New South Wales. So there's that. And there's also fellowships you can apply for that come up, but you still need to fit the criteria before you even can apply. And there's ones for performing arts, there's specific or literature, or there seem to be a lot for artists, so people who illustrate more than people who write. But I haven't been able to tap into any in New South Wales. Quite often it can be an organisation that has a project and they can apply for a grant, and then that flows on to you because you can then be employed to do the project for them as a writer or a creative, if you know what I mean. So there's that sort of way of looking at it as well. But
A long process, isn't it? It's no
and
matter where you
and
look, there's a process to it.
and if they have conditions or I don't know what you call it, outcomes you need to when you're applying, you need to cover all of those things. So I figure if you can't cover them well, you're not going to get the grant anyway. So if you do it, I would do it well, and then I don't know if I would get someone to check it or whatever, but
So I was just going to ask if you really wanted it and you weren't sure you had done it well enough, would you pay someone to write it for you, to look at it?
I wouldn't pay someone to write it for me, but I would pay someone to look at it, probably just to do an edit. I'm notorious for missing punctuation or just to make sure it sounds very professional and not amateurish, so it's got the right voice. I think and your voice needs to come through in it too when you're applying because you're a person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that criteria, write it get someone to look at it. Yeah, but I don't know anybody in my personal circle that has, except for the girl I taught, achieved one, like got one, because they're quite rare.
Yes, yes. Emma, Karen mentioned there's more open to illustrators, grants for illustrators. Have you found that? Is that your experience?
I personally haven't investigated too much into grants myself. I did a little bit more when I was working in animation and film. And I know that Screen Australia offers grants. It's a big involved process, but it's really good. And they, if your vision for the story you want to tell aligns with what they're looking for, it's definitely something worth checking checking in with them. You were discussing hiring help with applying for grants. I've actually had experience with being an illustrator approached to provide visuals for a pitch to getting grants or yeah, like sort of pitches. And this is really timely because I've been approached to help create visuals for a grant with the university. So I definitely think if you need extra support, it is great to sort of look into some people who have experience writing grants or offer that sort of support, or someone who could provide visuals. That helps. Like it can be a process that you collaborate on. And then some grants also involve collaboration because you might be pitching as like a number of creatives. So you might be an author and an illustrator pitching, or you've written like a script and you've got sort of your team who is really eager to work on that script. So sometimes I think that really helps if you sort of got a few other creatives supporting you that are also eager to bring that project to life. So yeah, that's another way to maybe look at it. It all depends on the grant and what the requirements are. And I think if you're applying, definitely give yourself a couple of days to go through the process because they are lengthy. But yeah, if you need that extra support, there are people out there that can help you and you don't have to sort of navigate that alone. And if you can get into contact with people who have won that grant or have been successful with their grant applications, if they're happy to talk with you, I think that's really invaluable too. So again, it's always, I know I always go back to reach out to your network and your community, but I just think it's just a great spot to start if you're feeling a little bit lost, because there's a lot of people out there who were in your shoes and are happy to advise, because yeah, we've all started somewhere or had our beginnings.
Yeah, that's right. Chris, have you applied for a grant, or are you looking at applying
no.
for a grant?
Too much paperwork is the first thing that you see on all of these things. I actually have a relative that won a scholarship to drama school that was paid for by a government grant, but I think he had to go through 4 or 5 different auditions. So that's the level that on all these grants, the application process is so long that most people just don't bother. I also haven't seen any that particularly provide enough funding that would make filling out all the paperwork worthwhile, which is where it suddenly becomes counterintuitive, the ones I see that are asking for payment to apply for the grant. Well, why would I pay if I need the money from the grant anyway? So I still can't quite get my head around that one. But where I've noticed, particularly in the UK, I don't want to say there aren't any government grants, but if there are, I can't find them. It tends to be foundations, charities, sometimes publishers as well, giving these grants. But most of the places I've seen them, every few days I get a list of available writing jobs, and there are quite a lot very niche grants being given out to either certain topics or certain groups of people. So these do exist out there. It just takes an awful lot of looking, and then the application process for all the ones I can see seem quite significant. Yes, it's going to take time to fill in the application, but what comes after that could be months before you actually get the grant. So it's a really niche area for people to go down, but if you do go down it, the key to it is going to be patience.
Yeah, I think it does. It takes months. You have to apply by a certain date, and you may not get it until 6 months plus later. So yeah, it is very much a long process. When I was researching this morning, that did actually come up, that yes, it is a long process, and it has to go through this person, then that person, and that person, and it didn't matter if it was government or local or a charity. It seemed to have been just the same process. This is in Australia. But they all kind of said the same thing: to tailor the application, to really showcase your skills, and to really clearly explain why your project needs the funds. They're the three main things that kept coming up. Have you found that in Canada, Holly? I guess that would be the same across the board?
Yes, from what I I really have very little knowledge of it, but it appears that there's quite a bit of tailoring would be needed to each particular, and yeah, like just very similar. Everything that everyone has said about it, really.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting, I don't know what you call it, an interesting process to go through if you're keen. I don't personally know anyone who has got a grant. I know those who have tried. So I can't really tap into anyone. But you never know. It might be something that I could look at down the track. Would you consider looking at it down the track, Emma? Applying for a grant
Yeah, I
yourself?
think, yeah, I actually am considering looking at more like creative business grants if researching those. That aligns with what my work is, a lot of my work is. And I'm really interested to see what happens with the university grant I'm going to help support someone with. So, I think it's worth just being aware of all the opportunities that are on offer, and just keeping sort of your eye on that to see if it aligns with what your circumstances. I think, yeah, it's always good to just sort of, there's a lot of things to keep the finger on your finger on the pulse. But I think that helps a lot, because it's sort of, there's a lot of work, but sometimes it's also the right time, right place can sometimes give you that little boost you need, and that could be a grant.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Chris, any final words? Apply for a grant?
Yeah,
Yes, no?
I'd love to. I never turn down money if I can help it. So, but listening to this, it actually, going back to an earlier episode we did, it seems easier to pitch to publishers and agents than to actually find a grant and get through the application process. And that's the little bit that comes across and is concerning. If it was easier for people to understand and a clearer process, it would be a much easier conversation and much easier for people to understand what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen, last words from you?
Basically, I think too, it comes down to budget and who has the funding available to even provide the opportunity. So when you don't live in that world, you don't really know, unless it's like a government department, but even they are cutting or whatever. they're the ones that are offered the opportunities usually. Or it could be like the Australian Society of Authors. They have sometimes something. So you should just keep your eye out, because you just never know. You know what I mean? Like, I was asked about our Shell Harbour, and I looked, but there was no opportunity. So the only way to make that happen was for me just to back myself. Like what Holly said, she just backed herself. But that doesn't mean you close it off. You keep an eye out, and you just never know. There might be that one time you're lucky and you go, wow, I can apply for that and give this a red hot go. And even if you don't get it, I think the process of applying for it would be good learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, everyone, for your input again today. A bit of a tough one today, a tricky one, but that's all a part of our learning, isn't it? You don't know unless you talk about it, and it is a learning process. So thank you, everyone, and I will see you all again next week.